Hello, my name's Tom Cahill. It's the 7th of May 2014. I just want to make a quick video about something that I've been wondering about. I've not been in England for a little while, and yesterday I heard that, or maybe it was the day before, that not that I knew who she was, despite the fact that all the news media is making out she's really famous. And she just isn't. She's not a household name. Virtually no one's heard of her. She's one of these nobodies. I think she maybe was on Radio 1 or something like that. One of these things that nobody listens to, but they make out everybody's listening to maintain the bogus funding of the BBC, to propagandise everybody. If you don't know, they have this with lots of bands and stuff in England. They go, oh, they're a big sensation, everyone knows who they are. And it's like, I don't know who they are. Idiots who think they need to know all the bands are, like collecting football stickers of like very, very obscure football teams they've never even seen play or have any interest in, but they think they need to know to make them manly. Same kind of thing. It's a kind of unisex hobby of teenagers and people in their own early 20s and people who've got the mental intelligence, even though they're in their 50s, of like 12-year-olds or 6-year-olds. Sorry. Anyway, this woman called Peaches Geldof was the stepdaughter of Bob Geldof. So she's a stepdaughter. She's not his actual daughter. But he was obviously married to her mum for a while. But her mum died quite a while back, probably about 10 years ago. I believe of a heroin overdose, or I believe that that's what the story was. Right now, this Peaches is meant to have been found. Typical, like the spy in a bag. If you look up spy in a bag, this Welsh guy worked for MI6. That's Military Intelligence 6. That's our Foreign Intelligence Service. Was found in a bag in his bath, and they said it was suicide. I think it was a locked bag. Yeah, it was a locked bag, a North Face like carry-all. The really big ones, you can't put all your stuff in them. They're quite soft though. You put them on a plane, but they're really, really, really big. You could easily fit a body in it if it's folded up. But anyway, they had this Welsh guy in this bag, and it's just, it's not funny because but like it is funny. The story they expect you to believe is that he's got himself in the bag and somehow died in the bag, and then for some reason people have gone in and found him, but they say it's suicide. But the whole point is, what on earth? It's impossible for him to have got in the bag and locked it. It's impossible. There's been experiments done on these bags. It's impossible. It's obviously impossible anyway, because you don't even need to do experiments. But they come up with this ridiculous story that he's been found in this bag, and then they don't go on about that, obviously. They just go, he frequented gay bars, and he went to bars that had like transvestites in, and he also had a load of women's clothing. Now then you find out that he was actually going to quit MI6. This is probably what got him killed, and he was going to go on a kind of a course to be a kind of tailor. So he had samples of clothes. Obviously, he was using them to like practice his tailoring them. So that's why he had women's clothes. The whole thing, and then at the end of these articles, it will say at the bottom, but we don't know if any of this is true. This is just what we've heard. But the way they describe it, I know it absolutely disgusted his parents. That's what you hear on some of the more honest reporting, but they're nowhere near honest. But they say that his mum and dad are outraged by the way they've just talked about their son, like he's some raving like transvestite pervert, and he wasn't. He was just doing his job, and he decided to leave and get a proper job, and they obviously murdered him, and then they made this bullshit story up about how he's killed himself. Anyway, right, so Peaches Geldof, this woman, Bob Geldof's daughter. Now, Bob Geldof was the one who did Live Aid, the first Live Aid, which is where they stole all this money off the British public, said they were going to bring it to Africa, and then didn't give any of it to the poor, starving people in Africa. I don't know if you cast your eyes back, very horrific scenes in Ethiopia in the 80s of these children, and actually men and women as well, but they're all starved and really, really scrawny, really skinny. And interestingly enough, I found out since then of Ethiopia, people from Ethiopia, they say, well, that was only in one or two places. It was just business as usual everywhere else. It didn't even disrupt us. So that whole thing was whipped up. No doubt it was started by people from Western countries anyway, because all of those wars always are. But the point is, this Bob Geldof tricked everybody into thinking he was this scrag bag, so he must be okay because he's a scrag bag. The next thing, he's fucking knighted, yeah? And he's knighted, so if you're knighted, I know people who are knighted. I don't know, who I haven't actually caught doing anything like inappropriate to children, but normally it normally means you've done something extremely dishonest, and normally any royal given title implies something nasty you've done to children, or at least all the ones you get on the telly, it seems to be. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people get knighted, so maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe it's not like 50% of them are paedophiles, but maybe there's a lot of the more obscure ones who are just civil servants who you never hear of. So I don't really know how that works exactly. But anyway, getting back onto the point, the thing with this Bob Geldof is he's friends with Bono, that arsehole who fronts U2, and the one who's always constantly going on about rubbish about climate change. I hear now Bob Geldof also goes on about that. I know that Bob Geldof got into this movement in England where fathers aren't allowed to see their children almost by default if they fall out with the woman and they split up. They're not allowed to see the children. It's obviously just a communist family breaking down agenda that they're pushing. Now, because he got involved with that, people think, oh, he must be okay, because nobody who's got any brains about them approves of that agenda, because obviously it's very, very bad, and most people can see what that is a mile away. Even the British public can actually see that. So this is the point. Not just Bono, he's not just friends with him, he's also friends with like Tony Blair. You always loads of pictures of them, big smiles, obviously genuine smiles. He's like, he's an insider. He's not what he seems. He's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So this is the question, right? Let's just say this Peaches is dead, and she hasn't just decided she wants to duck out of the limelight and get a new identity and go off somewhere else, because she easily could, because she's actually not famous. That's the truth of the thing. But she is the descendant, or he's sort of a caretaker manager of her, isn't he? Since her mum died, especially. This is the question: did he decide he wanted her killed, or did they kill her to kind of give him a warning? That's my question, because this, let's just say she's dead, right? Let's just pretend she is for fact. She's apparently, like the spy in the bag, she was apparently found, and they said we suspect something to do with heroin addiction or heroin overdose. And then at the end of the articles, it always says, but that they're not sure if it was heroin, and there was no heroin paraphernalia. And a lot of people obviously point out that if you've just had heroin, you go into a kind of zonked out state. You can't really move. So if you'd had an overdose, you wouldn't get up, pull that heroin needle out, throw it in make it disappear. Go down to the heroin disposal bank maybe, because I think she died in New York, so they would have them around there. Have a little jog down there, and get rid of it all, and then drop dead on the sofa without any evidence of any heroin whatsoever. So quite clearly they're saying there was no heroin involved. That's what they're really saying. And also apparently she had one of her kids with her, and she's got two on the sofa with her. So would she really have been doing heroin on the sofa with the little kid, or would she just put the little kid in another room? Or put it on the flip side, if she didn't mind doing heroin around the children, wouldn't she have where would the other little kid have been? Doesn't make any sense, does it? The whole story's just stupid. And then when the people came into the house to find her, surely they would have said, for colour and background of the story, they found one of the little kids in one of the back rooms, or he was sleeping in bed, or something like that. None of this happened. So the story's obviously a bullshit story. But the point is, she still might be dead, mightn't she? I mean, it is possible that she's dead. In fact, it's quite likely she's dead. Maybe it's more than likely she's dead. So, I'd like to know, if she's dead, if you believe that, is it for a warning to what's his face, Scruffbag? The Scruffbag is he from Sevenoaks or somewhere like that in Kent? He's from Kent, that's where I'm from. I can't think what his name is now. Bob Geldof. That's not his real name, by the way. He's got a Jewish name. That's another important thing. And she was actually married to a Jew as well. So that's just something to bear in mind. He's got a Jewish name. He's not actually called Bob Geldof, by the way. As all of these people aren't actually called their proper names. Like Bono. Surprise, surprise, he's a Jew. Would that surprise you? So, and again, Tony Blair, the other guy he's very friendly with. His wife's a Jew. I think he's a Jew. So all his children will be Jews anyway, won't they? So this is the point. There's definitely a Jewish angle here. Now, there is another thing to think of in this particular instance. She apparently put some stuff on the internet, on Twitter, and she was in a bit of trouble, as they call it, for putting something on Twitter, naming, because she'd seen it on the internet, the names of the women who'd been allowing their children, and when I say children, I don't mean like 15-year-olds, I don't mean 7-year-olds, I mean like little babies who are like 1 and 2 and stuff like that, to be messed around with by this pop singer, again, who's apparently really famous, but no one I know has ever heard of him. I'd never heard of him, and I actually know someone who's telling me that their son is a kind of gig promoter in a similar area to where this guy lived, and he'd only ever come across the guy once, and he wasn't even like a big fish. Do you know what I mean? So look, no one really knew who he was. But this guy was working for this company called band called the Lost Prophets, and allegedly, right, she put these tweets up on Twitter saying who the names of these women were who'd effectively like agreed to let him rape in some instances their babies, and apparently as well, again, because you've got to be very careful of these stories. They were letting, but this is what's gone on the kind of court record, which maybe if you got like my experience of the court record, might make you think, well, then it's definitely not happened. Then has it? Yeah, is that one of them had been on the Skype, and he'd been telling the woman to do things to the baby whilst he was watching. They're all very, very weird, right? So she did that, but she's also linked to this woman called Fern Cotton, again, apparently very famous. Surprise, surprise, not very famous. She was the daughter of one of the bosses of the BBC. That's the paedophile organisation that is publicly funded by this kind of like extortion that you have to pay or they come around and start intimidating you in Britain. And what it does is it puts out all this false news, such as Building 7 coming down before it actually came down, and it's in the background. And then they have the audacity to defend themselves when they come out with a false story and say it comes from a newswire. So they've got no credibility whatsoever. Well, they've got credibility for supplying children to themselves and to other people who want to go and like be actors there, or celebrities who want to go for a visit. They've got credibility in paedophile circles. But despite the fact that is the respectable way in England, it's not really what most people want to be paying for when they're paying for the TV. It's like they want to be actually entertained, and they don't really want to be funding paedophilia. Most people, I do believe, in England don't really agree with this agenda. They are going along with it, obviously, but they don't really know what to do about it. That's the thing. But this girl called Fern Cotton, again, she was on Radio 1 a lot. I think she was a presenter. Yeah, she was a presenter on that. Absolutely, like no personality. She's quite good looking, actually, but obviously she's on radio, so it doesn't matter. I had seen her. I did recognise her face, and I did recognise the name, but I wouldn't have been able to put the name with the face. And the point is that she was going out with this Lost Prophets character, and weirdly and potentially suspiciously, she was still putting on the little jingle at the start of this Radio 1 show she was on. Said something about mega lols, like as in LOL for laugh out loud, and lols as in being more than one, and mega being like big. Well, I think you follow. So even when he'd been sort of accused of doing what he'd done, even when it was kind of, I think it was even after he'd been possibly convicted, she was still putting this on a show, allegedly, right? And so people were saying that's disgusting. You'd think she'd like try and wipe out all memory of him. So there's two options there, right? When you think of the amount of bullshit that you get on the TV and the amount of people they fit up for crimes constantly in this country, like Barry George, he's got off recently, but they've refused to give him any compensation. Some of the papers have given him compensation. You've got Ian Huntley, still in prison. Absolutely not a shred of evidence he killed those two little girls. A massive amount of evidence that he was fitted up, such as the two football shirts of theirs that were found semi-burnt in his bin. Why on earth would you semi-burn them and put them in the bin? And he's meant to have kind of manhandled the bodies into the loft, then moved them in another place, then done this. If he's some kind of like super duper Houdini child corpse hiding, switching around when he's under massive scrutiny expert, but he would do something as stupid as that, it's beyond belief. There's absolutely no way he's killed them. That is the most stupidest story going. Yet everybody hates him, thinks he's the worst person in the world. Now they've come out with this one about this lost profits guy, and they're saying that he's been actually raping little babies. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't. But you see, I wouldn't put it past them to just make it up. They make up quite a lot of stories. And, you know, you've got to remember that there was a time in the past where people took an interest in things and they paid attention, but now they're just in a state of fear and idiocy, utter idiocy or imbecility, and they can't really think because they're so scared of everything, and they're scared of losing their job, and they think a mortgage is a present, and they think that the fact that their house is worth fucking £2 million or something ridiculous like that is good, despite the fact obviously it's not, and they think the fact that the mortgages is the only way they could have got that way, because there's no way anyone could have bought them at that price otherwise. See, that's the whole point. And they also love the fact that their children are getting really good marks in school, even though they're as stupid and as useless as children who've never even been to school. In fact, much more useless. This is the point. They're not thinking. Nobody in England is thinking anymore. Hardly anybody. So what's happening? Well, Britain. Sorry, I don't mean to just combine it to the idiots in England. And so people aren't watching these cases. So it makes me think, what's the agenda? If she's dead, if this girl's dead, what's the agenda? She's been hanging around with this Fern girl. Does that, Fern Cotton, does that, I don't know whether that enough on its own, because people say, oh, it's because she was going to expose paedophilia. I don't really think on its own that's enough. I just don't think that's enough, because there's lots of people trying to expose it, and she was only up 25. It just makes me think, now that wouldn't be the reason. And if she was trying to expose it, more likely they'd do another Sally Bercow McAlpine thing where, they'd then take her to court, find her guilty, and she'd have to pay all this money, which she would never pay, obviously, but they would say she paid, or it would come from the BBC, the taxpayer would pay, and some, paedophile would get paid loads of money, or child murderer would get paid a big, massive, boozy bonus payout. So, I don't know, that's definitely distraction news. And then it gets onto these other things, and again, it's just like, what if she isn't dead? If she is dead, is it a warning to Bob Geldof, or is it for some reason, or punishment, or is it like him going along with it? Does he want it to happen? Does he want it to happen? Sorry. And then it comes onto this thing. There's a lot of fuss about this lost profits guy. I mean, it's sickening if he has actually raped these babies. Just the thought of it is very sick. But then again, I start thinking, hang on a minute. Why are they blaming all these famous people who are on the telly? Or, sorry, not famous people, unfamous people, but allegedly famous people. Why are they setting people who no one knows who they are up for these sort of potentially horrific things? And then could this just all be taking attention off more important things that are going on, like the actual paedophiles who are in the government, in the cabinet, in the judiciary, in the police and stuff like that? Could it and obviously in the BBC, that's where they're one of their most favourite audiences. And could that be the reason why they're sort of effectively setting up some of these old perverts who've just touched someone up? And you think, fucking hell, they just touched someone up. I mean, yeah, they maybe shouldn't have done it, but then I think it's a bit much going after them years and years and years and years and years after. Not to mention the fact there's not going to be any evidence years and years and years and years after, so it's all just going to go down to witnesses. And of course, that's it's very dubious, because of course, you've got these witnesses, their identity is protected in lots of instances, and it could all just be made up. I think it could all just be a big smokescreen. I'm not saying it's all a big smokescreen, but I think it's a smokescreen. And then there's, I do feel sorry for him. Poor old Max Clifford. Why are they sending him to prison for 8 years? Graham Ovenden wasn't even going to go to prison for a year, and he'd been fiddling with little girls who had been painting pornographic pictures of. He'd been actually touching them up when they were naked, when they were on their own. I think he was trying to rape them as well. He might have been raping them, but he was like a proper pedo. That's proper pedoing, touching up a 15-year-old when you're 20 or 25, 40 years ago. I mean, where's the comparison? He got off with nothing, then they eventually had to send him to prison for a bit. And poor old, I do feel sorry, well, in the context of things, He's probably a dickhead. He's probably done lots of bad stuff. I'm sure he has. But the whole point is, Graham's that Silcock character on the Tottenham Farm Estate or whatever it was called. He allegedly done lots of stuff wrong and was a terror to everybody. The whole point is he was fitted up. They spent the whole time fitting him up for something he didn't do. He was innocent of that. You know, you've got to play the game. If the guy hasn't done it, you can't go around saying he has done it and spending, you know, like masses of police money saying he has. So the whole thing's very confusing to me. And I don't know how it all fits together. And maybe someone else can help me. So, but these things are all linked. They are all linked, and there is actually linked because these people know each other. Not Silcock knowing them probably, but you know, apart from the rest, I was just using that as an example. All right, thanks very much. Bye bye.